Hello and welcome to Movie Buff's Cool Down, a mini show where we review movies playing in theaters right now. I'm your host, Shani B. You can find me on all the socials at It's Me, Shani B.
And I'm your other host, Cisco from Misfit Minded. Follow me on all the socials at misfit_minded and my website, misfitminded.com. Today we're reviewing MaXXXine, starring Elizabeth Debicki, Kevin Bacon, Halsey, and Mia Goth, of course, who's in all the other ones, and directed by Ty West. Yeah.
Maxine, I'm the private detective. I had to find you. What are you hiding?
I don't like walking out here with that freaking Night Stalker guy in the loose.
I can handle myself.
So said every dead girl in Hollywood.
If I knew 3 people who were murdered in 3 days, I'd be pretty scared. The past ain't finished with you.
You're a fucking movie star. Whatever's going on in your life that's interfering with this picture, squash it. I intend to.
It's America's new Scream Queen.
All right. If you haven't seen it, it is the sequel to Ty West's directorial debut X, and it follows the character Maxine Minx out to Hollywood to pursue her dream of fame, but it seems like she may not be able to outrun her demons. All right, tell me what you thought of this film.
So I saw it like last week, so I've had some time to like sleep on it a bit.
Okay.
But I think, it's definitely the weakest of the 3. I'll just start there. I do
Yeah.
think it is, what was it, 2021 or 2 when the first 2 came out?
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think it's 21.
Yeah. So when I did my rankings of the top 10 that year, I loved them both so much. I couldn't decide which to put in my top 10, so I put them both in there, just in the same slot. I was like, because I love what Ty West did. Like, I think it was such a cool experiment. Like, I remember the first time I saw X, I was a little like not as high in it as everyone else, and then
Okay.
and then Pearl came out, and it was interesting, and I really loved Pearl. Went back and watched X, and I thought it made it better for me in a weird
Wow.
way. Yeah,
Okay.
and so I really like both of those movies now. Like I think, and I've revisited them before Maxine too, like maybe a couple months ago, just because I wanted something to watch, and I watched them again. And I just think they're solid horror flicks. Like I really do. I think they're fun. They pay homage to like, X with the Texas Chainsaw Massacre vibes and like, shooting this like grainy porno. So you get like the 16 millimeter footage and
Yep.
just like very dirty and grimy. And like if you're a horror fan, you love that kind of stuff. And then Pearl was just so interesting because it was like, we've never seen a killer in the 1920s or is from especially a female killer. Like it was such
Right.
a new concept, and then the fact that Mia Goth like came back to play that character too, like it's just so unique. Like I don't you can't look at anything else like in current horror that's doing this in this way. So I was so hyped for Maxine. There's a lot of backstory, but I was so hyped. I think that trailer is a good trailer. Like I
Mm-hmm.
was like, all right, who's the killer? Um who's the killer going to be? Like, how is it going to connect to the other movies? And I just thought like you can kind of see them struggling to connect all of those pieces. Like you could feel the weight of the trilogy of ending the trilogy here. You know what I
Yes.
mean? And so I thought that was kind of the problem where they didn't really crack it, West or and Goth. They work on these movies together. I did appreciate the callbacks to other 80s sleaze films like Hardcore, which I just watched for the first time recently.
Nice.
Body Double, which I watched for the first time last year, maybe.
So
Um,
good.
Fade to Black, which is have you ever seen Fade to Black?
No, I haven't actually.
So I saw it with a group of friends too, which I recommend it to you too. I think it is better in that environment. Like it does
Okay.
work better with a crowd. But I recommended it to him too because he's another like hardcore horror head like us. It's basically this movie fan. He's like obsessed with movies. He's like a
Okay.
nerd. He gets bullied and basically goes on a revenge tour, killing people in costume as his favorite movie characters. It's so sweet.
Wow, that's actually such a good
I
idea.
know.
Wow, that's
And
great.
so
Okay.
they pay homage a little bit to it at the end. There's a Chinese theater. Like, no, we're not going to get into spoilers here, right? I don't think.
No,
Um,
we'll do our best to keep keep that stuff out.
But you see in the trailer, there's like a shot of the Chinese theater, and Fade to Black has a very good ending at the Chinese theater. So
Okay.
that was a little homage there. But yeah, I mean, when this trailer came out, I was just like so hyped for it. I was showing people. I was like, look at all the people they have in here. I think that might have been a problem too, though. Like now that I've had some time to think about it, where it's like
Yes.
they had so many characters to juggle, and it worked for like body count wise, I guess. But you never really. This is a MaXXXine story, and she kind of felt like a third wheel for a lot of it. You know what I mean? And so I do like the subversion of kind of, in the 80s, this person would be the final girl.
Yes.
And in these movies, what I like about it is that she's fucking people up, like Maxie, and she's very proud of it and like spoken about it in this movie. Like, so while I did like some of the cameos, like especially Giancarlo Esposito, which we talked about in their Captain America reaction, he is always amazing. He is chewing it up with that hairpiece. Kevin Bacon, I thought, was amazing in this too, as the Dick and doing the Foghorn Leghorn accent. I loved it.
Yep.
I'm a private detective, yeah, but it just, I don't know, it definitely did like kind of fall flat compared to the others, which is crazy because it had so much hype going into it. Couldn't have been like a better way to get into a third movie. So I don't know. That's where I'm at. What about you?
I'm pretty close to you.
Yeah.
My order is slightly different because I think X is the strongest of them in terms of having
I
kind
agree.
of
I agree.
a fully complete story. We see everything that happens. We learn everything we need to learn about this overarching story. It's like so concise and done so well. And I do think Pearl is a really interesting experiment, just like you say, and also like a technical filmmaking kind of like really juicy technical filmmaking in Pearl for sure, and amazing acting, of course. But I think that definitely made me have really high expectations here, and I did feel a little bit sort of like they did a whole lot of telling and not showing, in my opinion.
Definitely.
Which I was like, no, you can't do that. You do such a good job of showing everything in X, of showing all kinds of interesting things in Pearl, and then here, I don't know what happened. It's really weird to think of because it looks so good and it starts out so strong. It just kind of gets soft in the end.
Yeah, it does.
And I think you're right that like having so many people there and not necessarily having enough time to maybe fully develop them, because I forgot to include Monaghan and Bobby Cannavale, the cops who are also here.
Yeah.
They're an interesting other piece of this. But yeah, it just was one of those things where I was like, man, I definitely expected more. And I also kind of like I sort of knew what was happening pretty quickly, which made me kind of be like, oh, darn, darn.
Yeah.
Some of the way that like they marketed the idea of like Hollywood kind of being this killer place and then not really actually sort of using the like filmmaking piece of it as strongly as I thought they could. I don't know, just like a lot of things where I was like, I still had fun. It was still like glossy and, paid homage in interesting ways. I just, I was let down.
The hardcore piece of it, which like, I'm glad I watched that somewhat recently because that was fresh in my mind. But like the worst part of that movie, and I think I put that on my Letterboxd review too. And Schrader, who wrote the movie, Paul Schrader, like he admits this too, that like the ending is not what he wanted. And so they pay homage to the ending, which is like the worst part of that movie where, obviously he's going to LA. He's kind of enmeshing himself in this like seedy underbelly of LA where there's like these porn theaters and, these sex shows, these peep shows that you can go into. Like, I love that culture. Like, I really think that's an interesting setting for a movie. And so that's the best part of hardcore is him going in there. But then at the end, spoilers for hardcore, I guess, it's like, there's this kind of like fake out with like, or this part where he finds out she's making snuff films, which is like not a thing, even though like it's been in movies, but
they use it in movies a lot.
Yeah. So like, she's part of snuff films and it's like he has to save her from doing that, like, so they kind of pay homage to that in here. But again, like that is not what you should be doing if you're paying homage to hardcore. You should be doing all of the amazing LA stuff in the 80s, which hardcore does really well. And they sort of do in some instances here. Like you do see the peep show in one scene, but it's just like you said, it kind of gets lost in the sauce. I thought the cameos that didn't work for sure were like the pop star cameos, like the Halsey one, and then
Yeah.
I
They
don't.
barely got to do anything, which really bummed me
Yeah,
out
it was
because
just
I
to,
was
like, put
like
her name
so
in the
stoked.
trailer, I feel like, you know what I mean? Like, and that's unfortunate. And then the other guy that works at the video store, he's an artist as well. I
Yep.
blanking on his name, but they really don't get much to do. You know what I mean? Like it's so I
No.
don't mind using
No.
pop stars in these kind of movies. Like it is another metatextual thing of like Hollywood stars playing, these regular people. But
Yep.
yeah,
Yep.
I thought they didn't do anything. I don't know. What about you?
It just was too weak of a story at the end. Like I think ultimately it was just like a really kind of paint by numbersy where it's sort of like it's just this.
Yeah.
There wasn't anything subversive there. We didn't get to do much more with that. And I feel like that's why some of these great names were like ultimately wasted. Like even DeBecky is so good. She has really like
She
done the
has some
work and
really
knows who she's playing.
She had some laugh out loud moments for
Yeah,
in my
yeah,
friend
like
group. We
she is
were
there.
yeah.
But even she doesn't really get to do that much. And Lily Collins as well. Like I thought this was
Yeah,
such
what
a
the
good
heck?
Lily Collins role. She was so like in the two scenes we get with her, which is like
That's
I
it.
think literally all we get with her.
Yeah.
She was so funny and yeah, just it's one of those things where it's like everybody showed up and they would have given anything, I think, to like in service of a story, but there just wasn't like a big story here,
Mhm.
unfortunately.
Yeah, like I really like the Bobby Cannavale character too, and his like arc that he gets in the movie too.
It's
Like
true.
their like buddy cop stuff that they're doing like really worked, I think.
Yep.
But like you said, like even like Debicki too, like she's this like director of this horror film. Like I thought that was another piece that could have been interesting, where
So
like
cool.
they could have done like I was thinking they could have done like a Scream thing where Scream 2 and Scream 3, where there's like, so Scream 2 had the play and like
Yep.
it was like blending it into reality, like what's real and
Yes.
what's the play. And Scream 3
Yes.
does that on the movie set. Why didn't they do that with the
Exactly.
fucking horror movie? That would have
That's
been
what I
so
was
cool.
thinking too. Yes, I was thinking the same things. Like, why, why did they have her just like, I guess like they had all the movie making stuff go really fast instead of
Mhm.
be like where things really got soaked in. Like, there is a chase on the backlot, but it has nothing to do with like her history or her backstory or anything. To your point about Scream 3, when like there's a backlot chase there too, and it makes perfect sense because she's like being chased through her own memory in
Yes.
Scream 3.
Yeah,
And so I
that's the
thought,
best stuff in
something.
Scream 3.
Yes, yes. Yeah, Scream
So
3 for life. But like it just felt like they had a lot of really cool places to go and play and be, but they couldn't figure out how to weave them into the story in a way that was better than just like, kind of the spectacle, if you will.
yeah, and like another part I was looking forward to in the trailer, again, non-spoilers, but like they have this whole Bates Motel thing, right? Where
Mm-hmm.
they're going to the Bates Motel, and so I was like, ooh, that's gonna be another exciting piece where it's like this is a iconic horror film, and she's seeing the old lady Pearl from X in the window, and so
Right.
I thought that might play like a bigger part or have more of, and it just kind of was
Same.
like anticlimactic, like
Yeah,
that
it
whole
was just the
sequence.
spectacle of we
Yeah,
have the Bates Motel house here, so we're using it. Because like I think I was really looking for how these things are all going to be aligned because I remember in Pearl, and correct me if I'm wrong because I haven't seen it in a little while now, but
yeah.
when she auditions in Pearl, Pearl says the same thing, like you guys should all leave because I just nailed it. I think she
Um,
says that and then doesn't get cast. So it's like incredibly devastating to Pearl that she doesn't get cast.
she comes in hot. I know that for sure. She does come in
Yeah.
hot.
So I thought there would be a kind of through line too, where it was like Pearl and her mother were maybe somehow gonna be connected or something because like I don't know. I just felt like there was gonna be a little bit more through lines for her and Pearl being connected, not just sort of like how they came to meet each other in X. So I was like a little disappointed that that scene in the trailer didn't like actually mean there was something more there.
and that's like the theme of this trilogy, right? Is like searching for stardom, despite everything else going on in your life, or like at any cost, like
Yes,
that type
yes,
of thing. And so that's what makes like them kind of short shrifting the movie stuff so baffling to me. Where it's like
yeah,
you could have done that, where like so many actresses have wanted to movies and were unsuccessful, and it's like she shows up here, and they're like,
yeah,
"You're great." And that was it. And it's like that's
yeah.
that's not reality. I mean, my friend, I had forgotten this piece too, but he was telling me that in Body Double, because that's has a lot of porn,
So
production
good.
and stuff in there.
Yes.
That De Palma wanted to use a real porn actress, and the producer said absolutely not. Like, we are
Exactly.
not giving you the money to put in
Exactly.
these porn actresses. So like that was the reality in the 80s of
Well,
like, you know what I mean? And so like
yeah.
they're not really wrestling with that in any meaningful way here.
Well, and they didn't really work with the idea that like trying to like that it's so much harder to break through. And I think there are like, there's like a whole circumstance around that. You get called back, you do screen tests. Like it takes like over a month to get
Yeah.
cast in a movie. It truly does.
Hmm.
So it's kind of insane that they don't like try to use these things to a point where it's sort of like she's going to go insane trying to get this role, but her insanity is going to get it for her. Her like ruthlessness is going to get it for her. And they also don't do that thing where they acknowledge that like in Hollywood you have to sort of like be a porn star off screen with producers and stuff in order to get cast too. That's like another,
It's all
Hollywood
about like,
trope.
yeah,
And we
selling
didn't
yourself.
really see any of that. Like no producer was like, hey, trying to
That's
get
what I
at
was
that.
thinking too. Yeah, like, that even if she did get the movie, a lot of times, this is still a problem in Hollywood, like people trying to take advantage of you. And,
Yes.
they would do that a lot in
And
movies, not just
especially if you're
horror.
already a porn star, why would they
Yeah.
think it was inappropriate to do?
Exactly. And so, yeah, that she's in this sequel to this movie that, again, we don't really get to see much of. Like, I'm fine with them making up their own like franchise for this
I did want
movie
to see a couple more scenes or a few scenes I definitely wanted to
with
see.
Lily Collins. Yeah, I
Yes,
agree. Yeah,
yes.
because it's
Even
like,
her, like even Mia Goth, like being the dual personality of like who she's really going to be as an actor and who she is in real life. I just wanted more of that. I love movies within movies.
yeah, but because we're not familiar with this made up franchise, though, it's like we're removed from
Yes,
everything they're talking about. We have no reference point to like
exactly.
the scenes they're talking about or the characters, and so it's not necessarily that they had to use a legit movie that was made before, but like you have to
They
fill us
should have taught
in
us
on
more.
what the movie is. Like, what is the
Exactly.
movie? We kind of just get the idea that like she does have some delusions, thinking that this is going to make her a star, like it did for like Jamie Lee Curtis or John Travolta. Like she
Right.
mentions a couple of other ones where it's like, yes, John Travolta was in Carrie, that was based on a Stephen King movie and directed by an auteur like Brian
Yep.
De Palma. Same thing with Jamie Lee Curtis. She was in something, and so
You did a few. Yep.
Debicki, she's supposedly this like director that's rising up in Hollywood, like her star is rising in Hollywood, and so yeah, I wanted more of her too. I thought Debicki
Yes.
didn't have nearly enough to like make
Yeah.
her character, more memorable in
We
this
just
movie.
didn't get full arcs from everybody. We almost barely got a full arc even for Mia Goth's character, which I was sort of like,
Yeah,
I
I
I
know.
want a little more here too. And yeah, for sure, I think just being in LA, you have to use more of that. I feel like a movie is always better,
Have to.
and people get so much more excited when they come visit LA when movies have this type of thing in them. So it is kind of just like, it
Well,
was just a bummer to me where I was like waiting for it to really like take off, waiting for it to have like that last 15 minutes that X has where you're just like shock after shock after shock.
there are
And
some good moments in the final act, but I do think largely the final act is pretty messy.
it was, yeah, it was
Yeah,
like a little too predictable, and then it just like kind of wrapped up pretty quickly, I felt also.
yeah,
To the point where it was like I wasn't ever really worried that it wasn't going to go the way I thought it would go. I
pretty
was
much.
sort of
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
like, yeah, you just feel like you're just watching. And yeah, I feel like even like the resolution with the cops and stuff, we got no falling resolution with whatever happened to Monaghan after, her part in the finale there. And I thought that was kind of weird too. Just like, just a weird, like we were talking about on the trailer thing, the indie style ending where they were like, end
Credits roll.
action. And then it ended. I was like, no, no.
Well, and it's, again, it's compared, and I have a question I want to bring up, so I'll get back to that after this. But, you think of it's like I'm struggling to even remember the finale, and I just saw it a week ago. But like compared to like X and Pearl, I will never forget that like monologue, that 8-minute monologue that she has in
Yes.
Pearl over the credits. Like that was incredible.
Yep.
And same thing with X, where like they go
Oh.
into the house finally and just all hell breaks loose. Like it's, how can you forget that? And
And
this
it's
one,
so many surprises. When you
yeah.
think it's gonna go this way, it goes that way. And that's just what I wanted. I wanted more of that for sure.
I guess the
Um,
question I was thinking of though, I had some people asking me like, if you hadn't seen the other two, can you go into this and see it? And I was kind of curious about that because I think, maybe you
I think
could.
you could. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think because like again, they were juggling kind of closing out this trilogy and they really tried, but I don't know. It just for people that are our fans, I thought it might have been worse in some way.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Compared to someone that just watching this as a regular horror movie, they might like it a little
Yeah.
bit more.
Who maybe
Yeah.
hadn't seen. I feel like, yeah, if you hadn't seen X or Pearl, then maybe you could go in and be like, oh, now I do want to see those because I can feel that there's like something here. But I think if you definitely had seen X and Pearl, or even just X or just Pearl, you probably would have high expectations like we do and like be looking for something with a little bit more, with a little bit something left over. Like, that's exactly it. Is like I only saw it a couple days ago, so I still have it kind of fresh. But like
Yeah.
my partner was like, I can't even really remember some of the stuff that happened, and I already
Right.
forget.
It's
And I was like,
crazy.
oh, let me remind you. But like that shouldn't be it because to your point, we always remember that like final act of X. Like it's unforgettable.
Yeah. Um, and I will say that Mia Goth is like, one of my favorite actresses right now. Like, I think she's incredible every time I see her in something, even if I don't love the movie. Like, I don't love Maxine. I think she's always so. My problem isn't really with her performance. It's just like what she's asked to do, like in the writing. You know what I mean?
Not
And
enough.
there's not like a, maybe if she was, because it wants you to have it like both ways, where it's like she's so confident, she's not worried about any of the stuff that's going around her, but then her past is coming back to like haunt her in these ways. And so there's kind of again another disconnect there, where it's like maybe if we saw her like from the very beginning struggling, behind the scenes, but then when she gets in front of people, she like puts on this act, or
Right.
something like that, it would have worked
Yes.
a little bit better, like to see an arc that way, where she's
Yeah.
like having to overcome her trauma, which I know like I hate that word in horror right now too, but it's true.
It's
She, you survive what happened in X, you're gonna have some trauma. So
Yes, and I feel like if anything, that's what like that's another Hollywood trope is the idea of like if you use your trauma, it makes you a better actor.
yeah,
So, I feel like that's part of in the open what I was like really excited for. Like I can't complain about the first act of this movie. She is the
the
same
first act
ruthless
is the best
person we
for sure.
remembered.
Yeah.
Yep. She's showing like all these like planting all these seeds about what we're about to maybe see in terms of like the violence that's starting there, the way she's like reacting to Kevin Bacon. And then she does weirdly take a kind of turn where she's all of a sudden empathetic, which is like fine, but it's also sort of like, but that's not really who she is. That's like her strength is almost that she's
Yeah,
not
to compare
empathetic.
it to compare it to like Spider-Man, like the first Spider-Man, Peter Parker has to go through that like, why is that my problem? And then Uncle
Yes,
Ben dies and he's like, oh fuck, like
that's why.
and then this one, she has the same thing where she's like, I don't care about these people like going around getting killed when they're her friends. When like she should have the Uncle Ben reaction of like, oh shit, maybe I should from the
It
very
takes her a little
beginning.
time.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but we really don't get that until the second act. It's really weird. It's
And it's
really
just a
weird.
weird way that we get it too. Like it
Yeah.
felt kind of manufactured in the second act too, just a little like it didn't feel as authentic as I feel like Mia Goth is capable of making it feel. And I think that's why I agree with you that like this movie to me showed that like every actor showed up and knew what they were supposed to do, but they didn't have a lot to do. And that like isn't their fault. Like that is
Yeah.
in the writing, that is in the directing, because the directing seemed to be a little bit more preoccupied with paying homage, like using the double frame like De Palma does, like
Mhm.
playing around with the landscapes and the sets and everything, than it was with like matching storytelling.
Yeah, it was referencing a lot rather than trying to make its own thing, which is like again, it's fine to reference that, but like use that just as like a visual piece or like something like that or a thematic piece. You don't have to use it as like you don't have to actually go to Bates Motel if you're not doing something significant with the
That
Bates
has to
Motel.
do with the
Yeah.
Bates Motel. Like,
The fact too, like they mentioned this on the big picture where like, they have to say too, like, oh, this is where Psycho was shot. And it's like, dude, anyone who has seen a movie knows that, just by seeing Bates
it's
Motel.
on the like
Yeah.
ride at Universal
Yes,
Studios Park.
exactly.
So like you don't miss it. You're never gonna miss that that's what that is.
And so like, yeah, there's a point in the movie where, Debicki says like, "Oh, this is a B movie with A ideas" or something
I
like
loved
that.
that line, and
Yeah,
I was so disappointed that
and,
it didn't live up
and
to
that's
it.
what I'm saying. And you can tell Ty West is thinking he's doing the same here. And I'm like, this is more like an A movie, like wants to be an A movie, but really has like C ideas. It's like a
That's such a good point.
B
Yeah, this
movie
is a
with
B
C
movie with
ideas.
C ideas.
Yeah.
Yes. That's a good point. Yeah, I feel like I'm hurting for a really good movie right now, and it stinks because I feel like there was a lot of there was so much hype and excitement behind this. There was a lot of hype and excitement behind like Longlegs and even A Quiet Place. I feel like people were trying to say it was going to be really good, and I've seen all three, and I am completely underwhelmed by all three.
Oh
And
man.
I feel like this one had the most for me to be excited about because Ty West was working on this trilogy. It seems like he was really consumed by it, but like modern auteurs are just are a little different than some of our auteurs from the past, and it kind of bums me out.
Yeah, I think it might be we kind of talked about this on our last episode too, that like this was never meant to be a trilogy. So maybe
Right.
that could be where some of the problems came in, where he sort of took the opportunity to use the same sets to do Pearl,
Hmm.
just because of the situation. And so like this is doing his own thing, basically starting from scratch in a way. And so it's like you need to come up with a new movie, but then also finish the trilogy.
It's
Like,
hard.
it is really hard, but I mean, I would say the best compliments I can give this is like visually. I think he's a really good visual director. Like you
Yeah.
said, when the first like couple minutes were happening, and it's like that long tracking shot of like Mia Goth walking through like the kitchen and everything, and then like with the '80s music in the background, I was like pumped. I was like, all right,
Yes.
we're doing this. Let's go.
Hmm.
And then yeah, it just slowly like there's no kind of wrestling with like who she is as a character or like resolution with a lot of people. And I thought maybe the best things, in terms of like her with other characters would be like her stuff with Kevin Bacon. I thought was like probably the best.
And her
Uh,
stuff with Giancarlo was pretty good too.
but that was like so small, again, if they had gone deeper into that, maybe too, like maybe he's a sleazy agent who's trying to take advantage of her,
Which he should have been. His
yeah,
agency was called TNA.
yeah. It was just, again, it's like you're paying homage to these movies that were never meant to be A movies in the first place. You know what I mean? They were a lot of these like don't hold up really in a lot of ways, which is kind of funny that. But when you're trying to make an A movie out of them, maybe that's where some of the translation gets lost. You know what I mean? Because yeah, like even hardcore wouldn't call it a great movie. Paul Schrader wasn't even call that a great movie, and even like some of those other ones like Body Double, there's a lot of just like logical like things that are wrong with it that don't really make sense. But it was just like, it's one of those things where like you go see it just for like, there's a masked killer, and
Yep.
it's kind of that fun of like, all right, who's doing this, and like how are they getting away with it, and we didn't really even get that here, even though there are some like POV shots of the killer, which I liked.
Right.
Again, paying a lot of homage to De Palma and like the opening scene of Blowout, with
Yes.
the handheld stuff, all that stuff. Like I like
That's
that.
like another missing piece too, is like the psychology piece of any B horror movie that's gonna have an A idea has something psychological going on, and that's like what I think ends up elevating it, where it's like it's not just boobs and blood, like my
No.
favorite stuff, but
Which
there's
there
this
weren't enough boobs
psychological
and
idea.
blood in here, if we're gonna say that too. There was
Yes.
missing both
Barely
of those
any
too.
boobs, and I was like, hey, you're not allowed to recycle the boobs from X. Like I need new boobs and I need more
Yeah.
blood. But like there wasn't a psychological element to it, and I feel like that's why I'm down for all of De Palma's kind of like B vibe horror movies, because there's always something psychological in the background he wants to examine too. And I was hoping for something like that here, especially like, in my work, I work with actors, so I talk a lot
Mhm.
about how trauma impacts them. I talk a lot about all the social anxiety and all these other pieces. And I just was like, man, there's so much you could have used. What happened?
It's a tricky balance. I mean, even like the new Halloween trilogy got caught up in that, like trying
Yeah.
to make Halloween an A movie, and it's like that again. These were never meant to be A movies,
Yeah, you
like
can't
these.
try.
You
You gotta
can't.
let them if they're gonna, I guess.
It was elevated by John Carpenter's direction, the score, you know, the idea of this boogeyman character you don't know anything about, and they frequently try and fill in the blanks of like, who is Michael Myers and where did he come from? And it's like, that's not what it was about. That's never what it was about.
I think like that's why, even though like, you know, it's pretty gruesome, I do feel like that's why I like Rob Zombie's remake. Because he filled in the blanks. But
I like
he
it more than
used
most.
dark psychology. Yeah, he used like, he brought that psychological element to be like, who is this guy? I'll tell you, he's really fucked up.
Yeah.
And it's like, that's what we want him to be. That's what we always thought he was.
Yeah, I was having this debate on TikTok the other day of I do think that movie gets way overhated compared. I'm like, you know, whenever
It's so good.
I think it's just like one of those easy things where it's like people are like, oh, Rob Zombie, he's a bad director, and so then like all the Halloween movies, they're like, oh, those must be the worst ones. I'm like, dude, have you seen some of those Halloween sequels? Like, I would put the Halloween remake is above quite a few of them in my ranking. Like,
agreed. Yes.
You know, at least he was trying to do something different. You know what I mean? Like,
and it is very violent.
Very violent. Which this scene, you know, kind of delivers on some of the kills, but again, I thought lacking in that department.
Not enough.
Like,
yeah.
You're not going to deliver the kills. You're not going to deliver the sex. You have the 80s pastiche, but really nothing more. You
barely deliver on the story. I'm disappointed. I'm glad that, you know, it was made. I'm glad that this like journey was able to happen, you know, that Ty West could like learn all he learned making these movies. He could work with someone like Mia Goth and like, you know, they could do this together. But I do feel like that's the hard thing is like, if you come out so hot with a movie like X and then you just kind of get really lucky with what happened with Pearl, it is really hard, I think, to live up to something like that. You know, like I wouldn't call Pearl a sophomore slump, but like this feels like a sophomore slump to me, even though it's technically the third movie. So I don't know. I'm interested to see like where he goes from here, if he can take what he learned here and the ideas he was interested in here and like flesh them out a little bit better next time.
I mean, yeah, he's done a lot of other. I mean, House of the Devil is really good. The Innkeepers is another good one that he did. Like, he's been doing this kind of genre work. House of the Devil probably the most. Like, that's a straight up like 70s. You know,
a little bit. I don't know. I actually have a hot take on that. It feels like a real ripoff of Rosemary's Baby without any payoff.
It is
the same kind of payoff, I'll say. But like, I guess that's what it is. Like, he's got high concepts. I just need him to work to flesh the stories out more because X is so good. It like perfectly, it like does the full...
Made that leap. It had Kid Cudi in it, and he was great. You know what I mean? They had the music artist in there. You know, showing Dong though. You know, like Aang and Dong. You got to do that.
Everybody was there. Yeah, and everybody, we got to see everything, and it all made sense, and it tied together, but it wasn't like predictable. And I guess that is just really, really hard to do.
Yeah, I mean, all those 80s movies, it's like, there's a reason a lot of those that he's homaging never had they were never meant to be franchises in the first place. You know, Body Double, Dress to Kill, all those, they were one and dones. And, you know, that's part of the challenge of doing a trilogy now, or like expanding the story out. Maybe, you know, the story was done with Pearl, you know?
Yeah, like the story may not be, it may not be as easy to expand as some of the franchises somehow made it seem. And I guess like that's like the lesson here, so we'll have to see what he does next.
Yeah, but I'm looking forward to whatever Mia Goth does next, and you know, Ty West. You know, I've already seen a lot of overreactions online to this movie, and just like, you know, about her performance, and Ty West is the worst director of all time, and blah blah, like just all this. Yeah,
shit.
You know, don't go online.
I'm not coming at him that hard.
You know? But like, you know, he sort of found his like, you know, ingenue and Mia Goth or whatever. Like, I really like the work they do together. I think they pull out a lot of good in each other. So I don't want the lesson to be like, all right, well, that failed. You know, they don't have to work together again. It's like, no, you guys did 2 great movies together. You know.
Yep. We just have to figure out what's gonna work best next together. I'm cool with that.
And I highly recommend. I've been watching like a lot of the YouTube. Like, they actually did do way more press for MaXXXine than they did for any of the other 2 movies. So, you know, there's a lot of, especially like when you hear Mia Goth's voice in real life, you will be shocked beyond.
It's the greatest. It's the greatest.
She has the most mousy voice, and she picks the most intense roles. It's
so good.
You know,
I like that she used her real voice in Infinity Pool. I thought she was really good in Cronenberg's Son's Infinity Pool.
I really
Um,
like that movie. I think
Me
that,
too. Yeah,
yeah,
and
more
that's what
people
it is.
needed to
Like
see that.
she is a scream queen, but she's like an auteur scream queen. So she's the new age of that, which I want her to continue doing for sure. And I am interested in seeing like what Ty West does next because I do think he has a lot of technical skills. I think out of a lot of the new directors that have come out with horror movies that I like leave feeling kind of underwhelmed by the stories of, I still think the direction is promising. It's just
Mhm.
sort of like writing and directing is hard, you guys.
Hard.
Like it's not easy.
No. Yeah, but, yeah, highly recommend that because it's just every time I'm just shocked. I'm like, "Oh, yeah, that's how she talks."
That's
See,
right.
I was reminded, rest in peace, Shelley Duvall, who just passed away, and so I was,
Sure.
all when she talks in real life, that's pretty much what I think of with
Yes.
I was seeing all these videos, it's like, "Okay, that's Mia Goth. That's who
Yeah.
I'm thinking of." You know what I mean? Where it's like she can channel the, like, crazy performances, and she's on some of these interviews saying like she purposely chooses those types of part, like she likes challenging herself and going through all that. Yeah.
That's exactly right.
Yeah.
That's the actor with a capital A. So we'll
Mhm.
see. Yeah, we'll have to see. When it comes to trying to rate this movie, let's rate it out of 5 heels.
Okay.
How many heels would you give it?
Again, after sleeping on it, I think I was a little higher at the time. I think I'll go 2.5 out of 5. We'll go
Okay.
there.
Okay.
After talking with you and just, thinking back, it's like there's not, even when we were like thinking back about like some of the kills, it's like, yeah, oh yeah, like what were the kills? It's like you should not be, there's one that's like super violent and over the top, that unforgettable for reasons, but
Right. Right.
but yeah, it's like you needed to deliver something more, and I just don't think they fully got there, but yeah, Mia Gothman's Scream Queen since forever. I love, highly recommend Suspiria remake she's in. She's great in that.
Yes.
Like we said, with the what was the name of the other one? Infinity
Infinity
Pool.
Pool.
Yeah,
So
like
good.
there's so many other ones too that, I know MaXXXine is like probably one that people are more familiar with, but she's got plenty of other ones that, check out.
And I'm sure she's gonna make more.
Yes.
She's interested in them for sure, so she's gonna make more. I
What
think I
about
have
you?
to agree with you. I
Yeah.
was like in between maybe 2.5 or 3, but I think I
Yeah.
have to go under 3 just because 3 seems like one of those things where I'm like, where I would rewatch it more. And frankly, like
Hmm.
I'm much more interested in rewatching X or Pearl. I mean, maybe this. I guess we'll have to see. I'll have to rewatch Pearl again to see which I like more. Like this, I guess, like Pearl or Maxine in terms of like vibes in the background. Because I will say that's maybe a strength of Ty West is like he creates a vibe. He for
Oh,
sure
for sure.
creates a vibe.
Aesthetically, I mean, the
Um,
Technicolor of Pearl is way different than what he does in X, which is like a
exactly.
feat in itself. Yeah.
Exactly. So he's a promising director, but I think like overall this film just like it just let me down, unfortunately. So I think I'll go 2.5 as well. But yeah, I think like we say, it's still worth watching.
Yeah.
It's still checking out. Like being, seeing this whole franchise and getting a piece of it is still important. It's never easy for every one of your movies to be great.
Yeah, and like I think I'm with you too, where X is like probably the best one, and Pearl is really great too, just on a smaller stake scale. And then this one, it just kind of like tries to raise the stakes of everything. You know what I mean?
Right.
Which is just like maybe that's where, the biggest, highest budget, and it's doing well box office wise, but you know, not as successful as a story as we would have liked, but
Right.
still some fun moments to be had, and again, visually capturing that '80s aesthetic that we love. We love here on
Always
the
fun.
a lot of
Yes.
the movies we cover are '80s action flicks, so
It was
here
a
you
great
know.
time.
So the '80s
Yes.
horror films too had a definitely a certain vibe to it that
Yes.
it'll be interesting on rewatch too. I agree. Like I'm not in any hurry to see it again, but I'm curious if it's gonna hold up or get any better or worse on rewatch. I don't know.
Exactly. Yeah. Like once the hype dies down, once I've had some more time to think about it and rewatch it and see if I could pick anything else up, I'll check it out. But yeah, I think for right now, it was worth checking out. And yeah, we'll
I will
see.
say the people I was with definitely loved it, like way more than
Nice.
I did.
That's
So
good.
you know, I had one friend, and she was just like, you know, she is me and I am her. Like, there's definitely going to be that type of people,
That's
you know, that
awesome.
see it, where it's like, you know, you're going to get the Yas Queen crowd that
Let's
loves this
go.
movie just on the vibes. And like, they really were taken with her, you know, killing in high heels. And they said the most like, the least practical heels, you know, during this whole movie.
Yes,
You
it's
know,
true.
something. So I appreciated that, again, the crowd experience of seeing it with them. I think
Yeah,
made me a little more enjoyable. But yeah.
totally. All right, that wraps it up for us. Let's remind the people where they can find us.
All right. So you never miss a rep. Follow the show on Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube at We Stay Buff, and on Twitch at The Buffs. You follow me at Misfit_minded on all the socials, and my website, misfitminded.com.
Take us for a ride and subscribe to the podcast on Apple and Spotify. Please leave a positive review. 5 stars, 5 stars, 5 stars. And of course, you can follow me on all the socials at It's Me, Shani B. All right, thanks again for listening to our review of MaXXXine. Let us know what you thought of the movie, and we'll catch you next time for another edition of Movie Buff's Cool Down. Until then, stay buff.